The Blackcliff Weapon Series tells the stories of the creation of the Blackcliff weapons, and the people involved in making them. In this video, I go over these stories, which includes the ancestors of one character you may recognize. Also, if you like this video, consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot and I'd really appreciate it. Anyways, let's move right on and get into the video. A catalyst made from rare Blackcliff. It glows when activated, and cosmic energy circulates within. The device is circular, with a piece of blood-red core perfum fitted in the center. The core purum seems to wax and wane like a crimson moon, growing steadily brighter and then steadily darker in a never-ending cycle. The myriad mountains of Tianheng are a trove of 1,000 treasures, for deep within the rocks, bounteous jade gleams gloriously. This is to say, mining prospered in Liyue under Rex Lapis' rule. One by one, the ore deposits in Mount Tianheng and the surrounding area would run dry, and the miners would dig further. The result was a network of mine shafts stretching across the region in all directions. At their deepest point, the mines reached all the way to the Earth's core. Slowly, the once quiet region was beset by increasingly frequent disturbances. With a deep growl, the earth would tremble, causing a landslide on the mountains and cave-ins in the mines. In the night, the aggrieved souls of the innocent who died in the disasters could be heard wailing in the distance. Then, one day, a stranger arrived at Mount Qingse. The stranger was dressed in a full-length gown and spoke in an esoteric and eloquent manner. He claimed to be a thaumaturge visiting Liyue on a quest to find two craftsmen by the names of Yun and Han. Yun Huang, the first daughter of the Yun family, was then resident in Qingse village. She immediately sent a messenger to fetch Hang Se, the son of master craftsman Han Wu. The thaumaturge informed them both that in the past, the Yuns and Hans had jointly crafted a catalyst for the thaumaturges of the world. With the unrest now spreading throughout Liyue, the thaumaturge wishes to provide the Yun and Hans with a piece of crimson core purum, in the hope that it might help the people of Liyue through this troubled time. On receiving the message, Yun Huang and Hang Se lit the furnace at once, and crafted a Blackcliff catalyst with a crimson pure lapis at its core. The crimson stone resonated with the ley lines of the earth. A blood-red glow would fade in and out, as if to give forewarning of imminent tectonic activity. Just as the stars guide those who travel by night, so this catalyst was the light that gave safe passage to the people in Liyue through that tumultuous time of landslides and cave-ins. It was placed at the foot of Mount Tianheng for all to see. When peaceful days finally returned, the Blackcliff Agate quietly disappeared without a trace, just as had faded the fury of the Earth's core. A longsword, wrought from a rare kind of stone known as Blackcliff. Its sharp blade can cut through gold and jade with ease. On a clear moonlit night, a strand of dark crimson, about the length of an outstretched hand, becomes visible along the center of the blade. Its blood-red glow faintly flickers in the dark, as if the blade is howling out into the night, announcing its desire to tear through the earth. After designs for the new prototypes came into being, the master craftsman Han Wu overhauled his entire weapon catalog. This particular design used a rare substance, crystallized Blackcliff, to produce a superior quality blade. When forging a Blackcliff sword, subtle differences in temperature and in the type of water used for cooling can influence the final hardness and durability of the blade. This presents a major challenge to manufacturers of Blackcliff weaponry, but is one that the bladesmith must overcome if he is to free himself from the shackles that bind him and reach new heights of competency in his trade. Han Wu struggled to see beyond the limits of his casting techniques. Thanks to a contact of his good friend in the House of Yun, he was able to go with a crew to the chasm to personally procure the materials for his new weapon. but a cave entrapped the crew in the mineshaft for 4 days. Imprisoned within the impenetrable rock walls of the cave, the crew found their mining tools to be of no use. Deprived of all the natural light, and thus of all the knowledge as to the time of day, one by one, the trapped crew succumbed to the madness and despair. Just when they thought all hope was lost, Hanwu thought he saw a flickering emanate from the corner of the cave, where lay the prototype sword he had brought with him into the mine. With that sword, he carved their way to freedom, and the survivors emerged from the pits of the earth into glorious bright sunlight. But the moment that the first ray of sunlight made contact with the blade, it shattered into a million pieces. All strength left the master craftsman's legs, and he collapsed onto the ground. Months later, he remade the sword and declared, "This sword shall be named the Blackcliff Longsword, for it is made of Blackcliff." All who beheld the Blackcliff Longsword were bewitched by its beauty, spellbound by its sharpness, and transfixed by its tenacity. But the crew spoke not a word of what they had witnessed during their ordeal in the mine. Deep in the all-consuming darkness, when the master craftsman struck his blade against the cave wall with all his might, the sword released a deafening roar, like thunder sweeping across the plains. Perhaps the crew knew that the sword's cry was to foreshadow an earthquake years into the future. A sharp-tipped polearm, wrought from rare Blackcliff. It zaps through the air like lightning, unimpeded by the winds. Made in Blackcliff crystal from head to tip, the body is inlaid with red jade stones for decoration. Viewed in the moonlight, the swirling of blood-red light can be discerned within. Liyue master craftsman Han Wu had a son with his first wife. The son's name was Han Si, the cold and calculating. Cold, because his father wished him to be cool-headed and rational. Calculating, because his father wished him to be precise in his craft, that he might inherit the family business. But Hansi had other ambitions. During his days as a student, Hansi idled away his study time on martial arts fiction, while spending his free time practicing the art of the polearm up in the mountains. He was consumed by the desire to become a martial nomad, roaming the world with his pole for protection. When he scoured the lands in search of erosiderite, he sought not the rare ore itself, but the thrill of adventure. And when he ascended the highest peaks to commune with the Adepti, he desired not the wisdom of the sages, but the tale of his travels. Hansi cared not for the flames of the furnace and the working of weaponry. His father scolded him, but it was to no avail. Eventually, Hansi left home one day without bidding his father farewell. In his later years, Hanwu was involved in a mining accident that profoundly changed his temperament. Hansi caught wind of the ordeal and hurried home to see his father traveling through the night. Previously hot-tempered and never short of something to say, Hanwu was now calm and quiet. He no longer held any animosity towards his son for his reluctance to take over the forge. Finally, the father and son grew close for the first time in their lives. Hansi was ashamed of his past actions, but knew not how to redeem himself. Several years later, Hanwu breathed his last. Thus ended the life of a master craftsman of a generation. Per his father's will, Hansi retrieved an archive of weapon designs from the study. They were the fabled prototypes. The archive was sealed inside a wooden chest along with a letter addressed to Hansi. To my dear son Hansi, the world is vast and filled with many marvels. May you always see the wonder in the world, wherever your journey takes you. These designs were covered in comments penned by his father. Hansi was overjoyed at the sight and proceeded to peruse them all night long. As Hansi stepped outside the door of the study at the first light of dawn, he watched in wonder as a meteorite fell from the sky. It crashed down right before him in front of the Han residence, landing perfectly vertical. A host of emotions flooded Hansi's heart. Tears both of joy and sorrow streamed down his face as he cried, "The heavens have spoken! The heavens have spoken!" Hansi took the pitch-black erosiderite and added it to the Blackcliff that remained in the forge. Following his late father's designs to the letter, he crafted a pointed pole with a sharp tip that shimmered like ice and a body hard as bedrock. Hansi could have traveled the world with this trusty weapon in hand, but he chose not to. For Hansi vowed that starting that day, never again would the flames of the furnace die out, and never again would that working of weaponry cease. A broadsword wrought from rare Blackcliff. Weighty as a boulder, it has enough brute force to carve its way through a mountain. The blade is forged from a combination of Blackcliff crystal and a crimson ore. It is pitch black like a pool of ink, with red flames leaping from within. Blackcliff weaponry has its root in the ancient Prototype series. Blackcliff blades possess 3 distinguishing features: hard as bedrock, shimmer like ice, fierce as the blood that gives us life. Though the Slasher is a broadsword, it has a uniquely sharp blade, barely thicker than a thread of silk. The join between the red and black crystals is seamless, and each blade segment interlocks perfectly with the next to form a single cohesive body. With the flame motif and red jade stones that adorn the hilts, the sword has a dark and foreboding presence when viewed from afar, like bright red blood oozing from a bottomless pit of black ink. Master craftsman Hanwu once embarked on a quest to find the finest ore with which to cast a Blackcliff blade. He searched everywhere until he became involved in a mining accident. While trapped in the cave, his eyes perceived nothing but an all-engulfing and profoundly disorienting darkness. His ears rang with the thunderous crashing of rocks, as if the foundations of the world itself were caving in. In the aftermath of this ordeal, the craftsman furnace lay unused. Where flames had once burned bright, frigid dust now gathered as the forgotten fantasies of the forge dwindled and died. Hanwu's son, Hong Se, read that the Earth's core has been sealed off due to a monster infestation, and rushed to inform his father. Hanwu was racked with guilt upon hearing the news. He was certain that it was his trip into the mine that had disturbed the dragon from underground, and the meteorite from the heavens. He forced himself up from his sickbed, lit the fires of the furnace once more, and forged a mighty broadsword. When it was ready, Hansei took the sword into the mineshaft. There, on instructions from his father, he erected a shrine as tall as himself, and placed the sword inside to ward off evil and rebuke the dragon. Hanwu died peacefully in his sleep several years later. At the moment of Hanwu's death, a traveler passing by the mineshaft at Mount Tianheng saw a crimson light shining out from somewhere within the rocks. As the traveler watched on, a hidden shrine appeared and slowly opened. The broadsword inside the shrine shone faintly, as if weeping with bereavement. Hansi went to the mountains that very night to retrieve the blade. The Tianshu of that age personally engraved an inscription upon the blade. Carves open mountains and tears through the seas, shreds apart clouds and splits the moon. A longbow made from rare Blackcliff. Drawing the bow invokes a sound like the wind, a premonition of the final breeze for any target within 100 yards. With a jet black body contrasted by blood red ends, it's cold to the touch without being intimidating. A shot from this bow takes to the skies like a meteor, challenging both wind and thunder. The House of Yun has long since established itself in Liyue as a family of craftsmen. At the time of this bow's inception, the 7th head of the house, Hui, was well renowned as a member of the Qixing. Yun Hui had but one child, a daughter by the name of Huang. As per family custom, should she marry, her husband would take over as head of the house. Having been raised by an unyielding marital artist, Huang refused to take this path, and instead took over as the daughter she was, inciting endless gossip amongst the people. But Yun Huang took control at a hard time. The continent was troubled. Even the loftiest of peaks and deepest of caves collapsed to a symphony of low roars. The bounty of the earth beneath them was almost unreachable, threatening to bring an end to the legacy of their crafts. One night, Yunhong lay awake, unable to sleep, tortured by her worries that her family's name would end her. Amidst the sorrow that enveloped her, she could do naught but call upon the heavens and pray for celestial intervention in her desperate situation. It was then that Hong Si, who had long since abandoned his family business and wandered the continent, arrived in the village in his craftsman attire. He handed Huang a small wooden box, within which were the prototypes plans his father had revised in his later years. He also took out a bow and said, "As the issue arose from Blackcliff, so too shall it end by Blackcliff. It is said that the House of Yun appreciates archery. Should it please you, give this bow a try." Huang fired an arrow into the sky. It roared across the heavens like angry thunder, as the sound of the bowstring being released reverberated throughout the mountains. As she watched the clouds flow beneath the moon, she knew that her prayer had been answered. And that's it for the Blackcliff Weapon Series. This weapon series dives into the past of the Han and Yun families, also showing that the family of opera stars, the Yuns, were also once weaponsmiths, making it really cool to see how their clan evolved. Also, please give suggestions about what artifact set or weapon series you want me to cover too. I want to go over them all eventually. Anyways, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll see you all in the next video.